I'm Mackenzie Anderson, 34, and have spent my entire life being the failure in my family, despite working twice as hard as everyone else. My younger sister Rachel was always the golden child who could do no wrong. Last year, my parents casually handed her $560,000 for a mansion while telling me I wasn't worth investing in. What none of them knew was that my grandmother, the only person who ever truly saw me, secretly left me 5 acres of prime Oregon land, worth even more. Before I dive into how this all unfolded, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that subscribe button, and stick around to find out how being labeled the family failure led to the most valuable lesson of my life. Growing up in Oak Ridge, Oregon, meant living in the shadow of my parents' success. Robert and Diana Anderson weren't just any property developers. They were the property developers in 3 counties. Our home was a showcase of their achievements. 6 bedrooms, a pool that stayed empty most of the year thanks to Oregon weather, and family photos that looked more like advertisements than memories. From my earliest memories, there was a distinct difference in how my parents treated Rachel and me. When I brought home an A- in second grade math, my father frowned and said, "I guess we need to get you a tutor." When Rachel brought home a B+ in the same subject 3 years later, they took her out for ice cream to celebrate her improvement. I threw myself into academics, thinking achievement would finally earn their approval. In 5th grade, I spent months working on a science project about water conservation. I stayed up late researching, building a working model that demonstrated how different household fixtures affected water usage. The project won first place at the state science fair, earning recognition from local environmental groups. My parents weren't there to see it. They were at Rachel's soccer game, not a championship or anything special, just a regular season game where she spent most of her time on the bench. When I showed them my trophy that night, my mother glanced at it and said, "That's nice, honey," before returning to praising Rachel for participating in a team sport. My grandmother Eleanor was different. She lived about 20 minutes away on a beautiful piece of land that had been in the family for generations. While my parents built their fortune buying and selling properties, Grandma Eleanor held on to her 5 acres with its sweeping view of the mountains. "Land has value beyond money, Mackenzie," she would tell me during our weekend visits. "It has stories, it has soul." Those weekends with Grandma became my refuge. She attended every science fair, every debate competition, and every orchestra performance where I played second violin. She listened when I talked about books I was reading or ideas I was exploring. With her, I wasn't competing for attention or validation. The gap between Rachel and me widened during high school. I maintained a 4 gigapascals, joined the environmental club, and volunteered at the local Watershed Alliance. Rachel flitted between interests, never fully committing to anything but somehow always landing on her feet. When I was named valedictorian, my parents' response was, "Of course you are. You never do anything but study." When Rachel was chosen as homecoming princess, they threw a party and invited the entire neighborhood. The real breaking point came during college applications. I had set my sights on Columbia University's environmental science program, working through summers and taking extra courses to build the perfect application. When the thin envelope arrived instead of the thick acceptance packet, something broke inside me. My father found me crying in my room. I expected comfort, perhaps reassurance that there were other excellent schools. Instead, he sighed and said, "Maybe this is a sign you need to be more realistic about your capabilities, Mackenzie." 2 years later, when Rachel got accepted to Cornell with grades and extracurriculars that paled in comparison to what mine had been, my parents took her on a shopping spree and upgraded her car as a reward. I attended Oregon State University on a partial scholarship. When I called home with the news, my mother said, "Well, I suppose that's appropriate for your level." The word failure wasn't explicitly used yet, but its shadow was forming. During family gatherings, relatives would ask Rachel about her Ivy League experience while asking me if I was enjoying community college, despite my repeated corrections. My parents never bothered to set the record straight. By the time I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in environmental science, the pattern was set. My achievements were expected and unremarkable. Rachel's mere completion of assignments was cause for celebration, but I was determined to carve my own path forward, with or without my family's approval. I graduated from Oregon State in 2011, possibly the worst time to enter the job market with an environmental science degree. The economy was still reeling from the recession, and environmental initiatives were the first things companies cut from their budgets. After 3 months of sending out resumes with no responses, I took a retail job at an outdoor equipment store. It paid the bills while I continued applying for positions in my field. When my parents asked what I was doing with my degree, I explained the difficult job market. Rachel's friend got 3 job offers right out of school. My mother pointed out during a Sunday dinner. She conveniently failed to mention that the friend's father was a banking executive who had arranged those offers. 6 months later, I finally landed an entry-level position with the State Environmental Department. The salary was modest, but I was ecstatic to begin my career. 3 months into the job, state budget cuts eliminated my entire department. "Maybe you should go into real estate," my father suggested when I called with the news. "At least then, when you fail, you'll learn something useful about the market." That was the first time the word fail was directly attached to me. It wouldn't be the last. Over the next few years, I bounced between temporary positions and contract work. Each time I thought I was gaining traction, something would happen. A grant wouldn't be renewed, a company would restructure, a project would end. With each setback, my parents' perception of me as a failure solidified. Rachel, meanwhile, seemed to float effortlessly through life. After Cornell, she walked straight into a position at a prestigious financial firm, courtesy of my father's golf buddy. Within 3 years, she was promoted twice. She drove a luxury car, wore designer clothes, and took exotic vacations she documented extensively on social media. During one particularly low period after losing yet another job, I stayed with my grandmother for a few weeks to regroup. We were sitting on her porch swing when I finally broke down. "What's wrong with me, Grandma? Why can't I just succeed at something, anything, the way Rachel does?" Grandma Eleanor took my hand in her weathered one. "Nothing's wrong with you, Mackenzie. You're trying to grow roses in a garden that only values sunflowers." "I don't understand," I said, wiping my eyes. "Your parents have a very narrow definition of success, money, status, things you can show off. You value impact, purpose, integrity. Those things don't photograph well for Christmas cards, but they're what make a life worth living." That conversation stayed with me as I continued my job search. Eventually, I found a position with a small environmental nonprofit called Green Oregon Initiative. The organization worked with landowners to implement sustainable practices and conservation efforts. The pay was even lower than my previous positions, but for the first time, I felt like my work mattered. It was at a fundraising event for Green Oregon that I met Jason Mitchell. He was there representing his family's small construction company, which specialized in sustainable building practices. He asked thoughtful questions about our watershed protection projects, and by the end of the evening, we'd exchanged phone numbers. Jason was unlike anyone I'd ever dated. He listened when I spoke. He asked about my day, and actually wanted to hear the answer. When I told him about my family dynamics, he didn't try to solve the problem or suggest I was exaggerating. He just said, "Their inability to see your worth doesn't diminish it." As our relationship grew, I began to build a life that felt authentic. My apartment was small, but filled with plants and books. My salary covered my needs with little left over, but I was doing work I believed in. Jason and I enjoyed simple pleasures, hiking in the mountains, cooking meals together, attending free community events. Whenever I visited my parents' home, the contrast was jarring. Rachel's achievements were displayed prominently, photos of her receiving awards, newspaper clippings about her firm, the expensive gifts she'd given them from her bonuses. Family gatherings became increasingly difficult. At Thanksgiving, the year I turned 30, Rachel announced she'd been named one of Portland Business Journal's 30 under 30 up-and-coming professionals. My parents beamed with pride. When someone asked what I was up to, I shared news about a grant we'd secured to protect a critical wetland habitat. Before I could finish explaining the project's significance, my father interrupted. "While we're sharing good news, Did everyone hear that Rachel's division exceeded their quarterly targets by 20%? Her bonus this year will probably be more than Mackenzie makes in a year. The table erupted in congratulatory comments while I pushed food around my plate. Later that evening, I overheard my mother talking to my aunt in the kitchen. "We're so proud of Rachel. She's everything we hoped our daughters would become. Mackenzie, well, she tries. But some people just aren't meant for success." I left early, declining dessert despite it being my grandmother's legendary apple pie. Grandma Eleanor followed me to the door. "They don't see," she whispered, hugging me tight. "But I do, Mackenzie. I see everything." Rachel's engagement to Timothy Bradford, heir to a commercial real estate company, came as no surprise to anyone. They'd been dating for just over a year, having met at a charity gala that cost more than my monthly rent. The announcement came via a professional photo shoot shared on social media, featuring Rachel's enormous diamond ring catching the sunset light on Cannon Beach. My parents immediately began planning an engagement party that would put royal weddings to shame. I offered to help but was politely sidelined. "We've hired professionals," my mother explained. "But you could pick up Grandma Eleanor if you don't mind. You know how she hates driving at night." The party was held at the Portland Hilton's Grand Ballroom. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above tables adorned with arrangements of white roses and orchids. A string quartet played softly in the corner. I wore my one good dress, a navy blue cocktail number I'd bought on clearance 3 years earlier. "You could have made more of an effort," my mother whispered when I arrived. "The photographer will be taking family photos later." I bit back a retort about not having a trust fund for designer clothes, and instead focused on helping Grandma Eleanor to her seat. At 82, she still carried herself with dignity. Her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon. She squeezed my hand as we watched Rachel work the room, Timothy at her side looking every bit the polished businessman. "Remember, appearances aren't everything," Grandma murmured. "The most beautiful gardens often hide behind simple gates." The dinner was exquisite, the champagne flowing freely. After the main course, my father stood and tapped his glass for attention. He gave a speech about Rachel finding the perfect partner, about how proud they were of everything she'd accomplished. And to show our support for this new chapter in your life, he concluded with a broad smile. "Your mother and I want to give you something special." My mother handed Rachel an envelope. Inside was a check and what looked like property documents. Rachel gasped dramatically. $560,000? And the lot in West Hills? "Daddy, Mom, this is too much." "Nothing is too much for our star," my father replied. "We know you and Timothy want to build something spectacular, and that lot has the best view in Portland. Consider it a down payment on your dream home." The room erupted in applause. I applauded too, robotically, while feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. My parents had never offered me financial support for anything beyond basic college tuition. When Jason and I had casually mentioned we were saving for a modest house someday, they'd changed the subject. Beside me, Grandma Eleanor's expression hardened. She didn't clap. After the speeches and congratulations, I excused myself to the restroom where I splashed cold water on my face. I wasn't jealous of Rachel's relationship or even the money itself. What hurt was the blatant disparity in how my parents valued us. When I returned to the party, Jason was waiting with a glass of water. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine," I said automatically, then corrected myself. "Actually, no, I'm not fine. But this isn't the place." Later that night, after driving Grandma Eleanor home and making sure she was settled, Jason and I returned to my apartment. I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto the couch. $560,000, I said into a throw pillow. "That's more than 5 times what we've saved for a house. That's more than I'll make in 10 years. Jason sat beside me, gently rubbing my back. "I know it's not about the money." "It's not," I agreed, sitting up. "It's about what it represents. They've never believed in me. Not once." The next day, I made a decision that surprised even myself. I called my parents and asked if I could come over for dinner that weekend, just the 4 of us. They agreed, probably thinking I wanted to discuss helping with wedding preparations. I spent the next few days rehearsing what I wanted to say, determined to remain calm and articulate. Jason offered to come with me, but this was something I needed to do alone. Sunday dinner was a subdued affair compared to the extravaganza of the engagement party. My mother had prepared roast beef, Rachel's favorite, not mine. I'd been pescatarian for 5 years. After dessert, I took a deep breath. I wanted to ask you both something that's been on my mind since the engagement party. If it's about your dress for the wedding, we've already chosen the bridesmaids' colors. My mother interjected. It's not about the wedding, I clarified. It's about the gift you gave Rachel and Timothy. My parents exchanged glances. I'm curious, I continued, keeping my voice steady, why you've never offered me similar support. I'm not asking for a mansion fund, but even when I struggled to find work after college, or when Jason and I mentioned saving for a small house, you never offered to help. The silence that followed felt interminable. Finally, my father cleared his throat. Mackenzie, your mother and I have always treated you and your sister equally. I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. Dad, that's demonstrably untrue. What your father means, my mother interjected, is that we've provided opportunities for both of you. It's not our fault if you haven't capitalized on them the way Rachel has. So this is about my perceived failures? My father leaned forward, his expression serious. We invest in success, Mackenzie, not failure. Rachel has proven she knows how to make the most of opportunities. Her career is thriving. She's marrying into a good family, and they'll use that property and money to build something impressive that will appreciate in value. And what have I failed at exactly? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I graduated with honors. I've held jobs in my field despite a brutal economy. I've never asked you for money. I've built a life with meaning and purpose. Don't be dramatic, my mother sighed. Look at where you are at 34 working at a nonprofit that could fold any day, living in that tiny apartment, dating a contractor. Jason owns his company, I corrected. A small company, she emphasized. You could have done so much more with your potential if you'd listened to our guidance. Instead, you've consistently chosen the impractical path. Why would we invest in that? The words stung all the more for confirming what I'd always suspected. In their eyes, I was a bad investment. A failure. I stood up, legs shaking, but voice remarkably steady. Thank you for your honesty. I won't take up any more of your evening. Mackenzie, don't be sensitive, my father called as I gathered my things. This is just practical financial planning. I turned at the door. It's never been about money. It's about believing in your children, both of them. But I understand now where we stand. I drove home in tears, but with a strange sense of clarity. When I told Jason what had happened, his normally gentle expression hardened. They're wrong about you, he said fiercely. And someday, they'll realize what they've lost. I decided that night to limit my contact with my parents. I would be civil at family gatherings, but I stopped seeking their approval or sharing details of my life. The only family event I couldn't miss was Sunday lunch with Grandma Eleanor, which my parents rarely attended anyway. Grandma noticed the change immediately. You seem lighter, she observed one Sunday as we prepared a salad together. I've stopped carrying other people's expectations, I replied. She smiled knowingly. It's about time. Number. Part 5. Grandmother's Death and the Secret Legacy. 2 months after Rachel's engagement party, Grandma Eleanor fell ill. What started as a seemingly routine case of bronchitis quickly developed into pneumonia. At her age, even with the best medical care, her body struggled to fight the infection. I took emergency leave from work to help care for her. My parents visited occasionally, bringing flowers and briefly sitting by her bedside before claiming other appointments needed their attention. Rachel came once, spent 15 minutes scrolling through her phone in the hospital room, then left citing wedding planning stress. For 3 weeks, I practically lived at the hospital. When the doctor suggested moving Grandma to hospice care, I arranged everything, ensuring she had a room with a view of the gardens. I brought her favorite quilt from home, photos of her late husband, and fresh flowers every other day. During those final weeks, Grandma Eleanor and I had conversations that I'll treasure forever. One evening, as sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, she took my hand. "You know, I was the family disappointment too," she said. "You? But everyone adores you." She chuckled weakly. "Now, perhaps. But when I was young, I scandalized everyone by refusing to marry the banker my parents had chosen. I wanted to teach instead. My father called me foolish, impractical. What happened? I taught elementary school for 40 years and married your grandfather, who had nothing but a good heart and strong hands. We bought that land when nobody wanted it, built our house ourselves, and created a life that made us happy." Her eyes, though clouded with age, sharpened with intensity. "Never let anyone make you feel small for choosing purpose over prestige, Mackenzie." As the days passed, Grandma grew weaker but seemed at peace. One night, as I read poetry to her Wordsworth, her favorite, she interrupted me. "Mackenzie, in my desk at home, second drawer, there's a letter for you. Promise you'll read it." "I promise," I said. "But you can tell me yourself when you're better." She smiled gently. "We both know that's not going to happen, dear one. Just remember that I see you. I've always seen you." Grandma Eleanor passed away peacefully 3 days later, with me holding her hand. She simply closed her eyes during an afternoon nap and didn't wake up. The doctor said it was as gentle a death as anyone could hope for. The funeral was held at the small church Grandma had attended for decades. I delivered the eulogy, sharing stories of her kindness, her wisdom, and her quiet strength. As I spoke, I noticed my father wiping away tears, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him in years. Rachel read a Bible verse, stumbling over several words and checking her watch twice. My mother fussed over the flower arrangements and made sure the reception was properly catered. They played their roles perfectly. The grieving son, the supportive daughter-in-law, the dutiful granddaughter. But none of them had truly known Grandma Eleanor the way I had. After the funeral, I couldn't bring myself to visit Grandma's house immediately. It was too raw, too final. 2 weeks later, I finally gathered the courage, bringing Jason for support. The house stood silent among the towering pines, its garden already showing signs of neglect. Using the key Grandma had given me years ago, I entered the home that had been my sanctuary. Everything remained exactly as she had left it, a half-finished crossword puzzle on the side table, her reading glasses perched on top of a novel, her cardigan draped over her favorite chair. I went to her desk and opened the second drawer as instructed. Inside was an envelope with my name written in her elegant, slanted script. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a brief letter and a legal document. I read the letter first. "My dearest Mackenzie, asterisk. If you're reading this, I've moved on to whatever adventure comes next. Don't grieve too long. I've had a good life, richer in the ways that truly matter than most could hope for. Asterisk. Asterisk. You've always been special to me, not because you try harder or achieve more, but because you see the world with such clarity and compassion. You understand what I learned late in life, that our worth isn't measured by our bank accounts or titles, but by the lives we touch and the integrity with which we live. Asterisk. Asterisk, I've watched your parents favor Rachel, not because she deserves more love, but because she reflects back the image they want to see of themselves. You reflect something more complicated, more authentic, and that frightens them. Asterisk. Asterisk. I can't change their perspective, but I can ensure that you have the foundation to build the life you deserve. I've left you my property, all 5 acres, the house, and everything in it. The land has been in our family for generations, and I know you'll honor its history while creating your own future there. Asterisk. Asterisk. Your parents and sister don't know about this arrangement. I've worked with my lawyer to ensure everything transfers smoothly. The enclosed document provides the details. Asterisk. Asterisk. Remember, being underestimated is a secret advantage. While they were watching Rachel shine, you were growing deep, strong roots that no storm can dislodge. Asterisk. Asterisk. All my love. Asterisk. Grandma Eleanor. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Jason sat beside me, his arm around my shoulders, saying nothing but offering his steady presence. The legal document confirmed what the letter stated. Grandma had left me her entire property. The land alone was worth at least $800,000, according to recent appraisals, possibly more given its location and the growing demand for property in the area. She left it all to me, I whispered in disbelief. Why wouldn't she tell me? Maybe she knew you'd try to talk her out of it, Jason suggested. Or maybe she wanted to protect you from your family's reaction until it was finalized. I thought about what this meant. I now owned more valuable property than many people acquire in a lifetime. The land that had been my safe haven was now mine to protect and cherish. What are you thinking? Jason asked, after I'd been quiet for several minutes. I'm thinking Grandma was right, I said, folding the letter carefully. Being underestimated is a secret advantage. No one saw this coming because no one was paying attention to what really mattered to her. That night, I decided to keep the inheritance to myself for a while. Not out of spite, but because I needed time to process what it meant and make plans without my family's influence or judgment. As Jason and I drove away from Grandma's house, my house now, I felt both grief and gratitude in equal measure. The woman who had always seen me had given me one final, powerful affirmation of my worth. For 6 months, I kept my inheritance private. I continued working at Green Oregon Initiative, maintained my modest apartment, and visited the property on weekends. Jason helped me tackle basic maintenance, fixing loose shingles, trimming overgrown paths, keeping the garden from completely returning to wilderness. We began making tentative plans. The house needed significant updates to be energy efficient, but its bones were solid. The land offered possibilities I'd only dreamed about, perhaps a demonstration site for sustainable practices, or simply a sanctuary where nature could thrive relatively undisturbed. We could build our own place over there, Jason suggested one Saturday, pointing to a sunny clearing about 100 yards from the main house. Something small, efficient. Live simply, save our money, gradually restore the original house. The idea took root in my imagination, a life built on my own terms, on land that held generations of family history. For the first time, I felt like I had options, breathing room, a foundation that couldn't be undermined by my parents' disapproval. Then came the phone call that shattered my peaceful planning. You sneaky, manipulative bitch. Rachel's voice sliced through the phone line without preamble. Were you ever going to tell us, or just sit back laughing at how you'd pulled one over on everyone? My stomach dropped. Rachel, what are you talking about? Don't play innocent. Amber told me everything. She works at the county assessor's office, remember? She was processing property tax records and saw that Grandma's land was transferred to you. All of it. Amber. Of course. Rachel's friend from high school who now worked in county government. I'd completely forgotten about that connection. I was going to tell everyone, I said, which wasn't entirely untrue. I had planned to share the news eventually, on my own timeline. Save it, Rachel snapped. Mom and Dad are livid. We're having a family meeting tomorrow at 7, their house. Don't even think about not showing up. She hung up before I could respond. Immediately, I called Jason. They know, I said when he answered. About the land. His sigh carried through the phone. I'll come with you tomorrow. No. I decided after a moment's thought. I need to handle this myself. The next evening, I arrived at my parents' house precisely at 7. My hands trembled as I rang the doorbell, but I stood straight, channeling Grandma Eleanor's quiet dignity. My mother opened the door without greeting and led me to the living room where my father and Rachel waited. Rachel's expression was thunderous. My father's was coldly controlled. Neither was a good sign. Sit down, my father directed, indicating an armchair position to face the three of them, a setup that felt intentionally like an interrogation. I remained standing. I prefer to stand, thank you. Fine. Would you care to explain why you've been hiding this substantial inheritance from your family for 6 months? Property that, by all rights, should have been divided among all of us? His phrasing ignited something inside me. By all rights, Grandma Eleanor's property was hers to dispose of as she wished. She chose to leave it to me. She was 82 and clearly not thinking clearly, my mother interjected. You must have influenced her. Spent all that time with her when she was vulnerable. I spent time with her because I loved her, I said, my voice rising despite my determination to stay calm. Unlike the rest of you, who could barely spare an hour a month to visit. Rachel stood, hands on her hips. This isn't about visitation schedules. This is about you secretly inheriting land worth almost $1 million while the rest of us got nothing. It's not fair. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. Not fair? Let me tell you what's not fair, Rachel. It's not fair that our parents gave you $560,000 for a house on top of the advantages you've enjoyed your entire life. It's not fair that my achievements have been dismissed while yours have been celebrated. It's not fair that I was told explicitly that I'm not worth investing in because I'm a failure. My father stood now too. That's enough, Mackenzie. We're not here to rehash your perceived slights. We're here to discuss a reasonable solution to this situation. What solution do you propose? I asked, already knowing the answer. You need to sell the property and split the proceeds equally between yourself and Rachel. No, I said simply. My father blinked, clearly not expecting direct refusal. Excuse me? I said no. The land is legally mine. Grandma Eleanor wanted me to have it, and I intend to honor her wishes. My mother's face hardened. After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me? Please, enlighten me. Because from where I stand, you've done nothing but undermine my confidence, dismiss my choices, and explicitly favor Rachel my entire life. That's not true, my father insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. We've always treated you both equally. Dad, you literally told me you invest in success, not failure. Those were your exact words. You gave Rachel over $500,000 while telling me I wasn't worth supporting. So please, don't insult my intelligence by claiming equal treatment. Rachel's face had turned an alarming shade of red. You don't deserve that property. You have no idea what to do with it. You'll probably turn it into some hippie commune for your environmental freak friends. What I do with my property is none of your concern, I replied evenly. Just as what you do with your parents' generous gifts is none of mine. My father adopted his business negotiation tone. Mackenzie, be reasonable. That land has been in the family for generations. It should benefit all of us. If you won't sell, we could develop it together, build luxury homes, maybe a small resort. The returns would be substantial. The suggestion made my blood run cold. Grandma Eleanor's beloved land carved up and commercialized the thought was physically painful. Absolutely not. The land stays intact. Then you leave us no choice, my father said, his voice dropping dangerously. We'll contest the will. Eleanor wasn't in her right mind toward the end. Any competent lawyer will see that. You would dishonor Grandma's final wishes out of greed? I asked, genuinely shocked despite everything. We're protecting family assets, my mother countered. If you won't be reasonable, legal action is our only option. I looked at each of them, these people who shared my blood but seemed incapable of understanding what truly mattered to me or to Grandma Eleanor. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The last lingering need for their approval evaporated. If you contest the will, you will lose, I said quietly. Grandma Eleanor was of perfectly sound mind. She had a medical evaluation before updating her will specifically to prevent this kind of challenge. Her lawyer has extensive documentation of her wishes and her reasoning. This was a bluff. I didn't know if such documentation existed, but I delivered it with absolute confidence. Furthermore, I continued, if you pursue this, our relationship will be over, completely. I've spent my entire life trying to earn your love and approval, but I'm done. I don't need it anymore. My father's face flushed with anger. Are you threatening us? I'm setting boundaries. You have a choice to make. Accept Grandma's decision and maintain a relationship with me, or fight me for the land and lose me forever. It's up to you. The room fell silent. Rachel stared at me as if she'd never seen me before. Perhaps she hadn't. Not the real me. The one who could stand firm against family pressure. "You ungrateful little," my mother began. But my father held up his hand to stop her. "If that's your position, then I think we're done here," he said coldly. "Don't expect any support from this family going forward." I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. I never did. As I turned to leave, Rachel called after me. "This isn't over. That land should be part of our family legacy, not your personal playground." I paused at the door. "It is part of our family legacy, just not the part you're interested in preserving." I walked out of my parents' house feeling lighter than I had in years, despite the gravity of what had just happened. In my car, I finally let the tears come, not tears of sadness or regret, but of release. The ties that had bound me to unhealthy family dynamics were severing, painful but necessary. When I arrived home, Jason was waiting on my doorstep. One look at my face told him everything he needed to know. "It went that badly?" he asked, pulling me into a hug. "Actually," I said against his shoulder, "I think it went exactly as it needed to." 3 weeks of silence followed the confrontation. No calls from my parents, no messages from Rachel. I focused on work, spent weekends at the property, and tried to process the seismic shift in my family relationships. Jason was my rock, offering practical help with the land and emotional support when memories or doubts surfaced. Then, unexpectedly, Rachel texted me. "We need to talk, just us sisters, coffee tomorrow? My first instinct was to refuse, but a small part of me hoped that perhaps she'd reflected on our family dynamics. Maybe there was a chance to salvage something from the wreckage of our relationship. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our homes. Rachel arrived looking uncharacteristically subdued, dressed down in jeans and a sweater instead of her usual power suit. "Thanks for coming," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I've been doing a lot of thinking." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I was angry when I found out about the land," she admitted, stirring her latte absently. "It felt like you'd gone behind everyone's back. But after cooling down, I've realized something important." "What's that?" I asked cautiously. "Family is worth more than property." She reached across the table to touch my hand. "Look, we've never been close, and that's probably mostly my fault. I know Mom and Dad have always favored me, and I've never really stood up for you. I'm sorry for that." The apology caught me off guard. In 34 years, I couldn't remember Rachel ever apologizing to me for anything. "I don't want to fight you," she continued. "If Grandma wanted you to have the land, then you should have it. I just miss my sister." Something about her sudden change of heart felt off, but I wanted so badly to believe her that I pushed my suspicions aside. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "It means a lot." For the next hour, Rachel and I talked more openly than we had in years. She asked about my plans for the property, and I shared my vision of preserving most of the natural landscape while creating a small, sustainable living space. "That actually sounds really nice," she said. "I can see why Grandma would want you to be the one to take care of it. You always understood her in a way the rest of us didn't." By the time we parted, tentative plans had been made for Rachel to visit the property the following weekend. She hugged me goodbye, and I drove home feeling cautiously optimistic about rebuilding our relationship. "She just completely changed her position?" Jason asked that evening when I recounted the meeting. "That doesn't sound like Rachel." "People can change," I said, wanting to believe it myself. Maybe seeing me stand up to all of you made her reassess things. Jason nodded, but his expression remained skeptical. That weekend, Rachel came to the property as planned. She seemed genuinely interested as I showed her around, asking questions about the history of certain features and admiring the view from Grandma's back porch. "I can see why you love it here," she said, as we sat with tea in the kitchen. "There's something special about this place." "Grandma always said it had a soul," I replied, warming to the conversation. She believed land remembers the people who care for it. Rachel smiled. "That sounds like her." She paused, then added casually, "So, have you talked to Mom and Dad at all?" "No. I'm giving everyone space to process things. They're still pretty upset, she said. But I've been talking to them, trying to help them understand your perspective. I was touched by this apparent advocacy. Thank you. That means a lot. After Rachel left, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps one relationship in my family could be salvaged. For the next month, we met regularly for coffee or lunch. She texted me articles about sustainable building practices and even introduced me to a friend who had built an eco-friendly home. It felt like we were finally developing the sisterly bond I'd always wanted. Then came the certified letter from a law firm I'd never heard of. Asterisk. Dear Miss Anderson. Asterisk. Asterisk. This firm represents Robert and Diana Anderson and Rachel Anderson Bradford in the matter of the estate of Eleanor Jean Anderson. Our clients contest the validity of the last will and testament dated the 15th of March 2020 on grounds of undue influence and testamentary incapacity. Asterisk. The letter continued with legal terminology that made my head spin, but the message was clear. My parents and Rachel were officially challenging Grandma's will in court. I called Jason immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. They're suing me, I said when he answered. All of them, including Rachel. What? After everything she said? It was all an act, I realized. The truth hitting me like a physical blow. She was gathering information. All those questions about the property, about Grandma's state of mind toward the end, she was building their case. Jason's voice hardened. I'll be right over. And I'm calling my cousin Marcus. He's an estate attorney. Marcus Reynolds arrived at my apartment that evening, a tall man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. He reviewed the letter and asked detailed questions about Grandma Eleanor's will, her mental state in her final months, and my interactions with her. Based on what you've told me, their case is weak, he concluded. Visiting your grandmother regularly and being close to her isn't undue influence. It's being a loving granddaughter. And from my experience with hospice cases, the medical records will likely show your grandmother was mentally competent until very near the end. So we fight this? I asked. We fight, he confirmed. And from what you've shared, I believe we'll win. The next morning, my phone rang with Rachel's number. Against my better judgment, I answered. How could you? I demanded before she could speak. Oh, drop the innocent act, she snapped. Her voice completely different from the conciliatory tone she'd used in recent weeks. You manipulated a confused old woman into giving you everything. Did you really think we'd just let that stand? She wasn't confused. She knew exactly what she was doing. Well, we'll let a judge decide that, won't we? In the meantime, I'd suggest you consider our settlement offer. 50% of the property value is better than nothing, which is what you'll have after legal fees if you fight us. You pretended to reconcile with me, I said, still struggling to process the depth of her betrayal. You made me believe you cared. I do care about family assets being distributed fairly. That land should have gone to all of us, not just you. I did what was necessary to protect what's rightfully mine. Nothing about that land is rightfully yours, I replied, finding strength in my anger. Grandma Eleanor chose me as her heir because she knew I would honor her wishes and protect the land. You've just proven she made the right choice. We'll see about that, Rachel said coldly. Enjoy the property while you can. After she hung up, I sat motionless, trying to absorb what had happened. The sister I'd cautiously welcomed back into my life had been plotting against me the entire time. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. When Jason arrived an hour later, he found me sitting in the same spot, staring at the wall. Hey, he said gently, kneeling in front of me. Talk to me. She used me, I whispered. All that reconciliation, all those conversations, she was just gathering ammunition. I know, he said, taking my hands in his. And it's unforgivable. But we're going to fight this, and we're going to win. Over the next weeks, Marcus guided me through the process of responding to the legal challenge. We gathered medical records showing Grandma Eleanor had been evaluated by her doctors and found mentally competent just weeks before updating her will. We collected affidavits from her hospice nurses confirming her lucidity until her final days. Most powerful was the letter from Grandma's attorney explaining that she had been planning this bequest for years, long before any illness, and had been explicit about her reasons. She had even recorded a video statement explaining her decision, knowing her son might contest it. When Marcus shared this information with my family's lawyers, the tone of the legal correspondence shifted dramatically. They requested a meeting to discuss settlement options. They know they're going to lose, Marcus explained. Now they're just trying to salvage something. The proposed settlement would have given Rachel and my parents a small portion of the land, the least environmentally sensitive corner, and a modest cash payment. It was far less than they had initially demanded. Should I take it? I asked Marcus. Just to end this? That's entirely your decision, he replied. Legally, we're in a very strong position to reject it. I thought about Grandma Eleanor, about her clear wishes, about the trust she had placed in me. I thought about Rachel's calculated betrayal and my parents' lifelong dismissal of my worth. No, I decided firmly. I'm not giving them anything. Not an inch of land, not a dollar. Grandma wanted me to have this property intact, and that's how it's going to stay. 2 days later, I received a furious call from Rachel. You rejected our very generous offer? She shouted. You're making a huge mistake. The only mistake I made was believing you could change, I replied calmly. Goodbye, Rachel. I blocked her number immediately afterward, a symbolic act that felt like cutting the final tie to my toxic family dynamic. That evening, I cried for hours in Jason's arms, not for the loss of the relationship with my sister, but for the fact that a real relationship had never existed to begin with. It's okay to grieve for what should have been, Jason said softly as he stroked my hair. But don't lose sight of what is and what can be. A month later, we received word that my family had withdrawn their legal challenge. According to Marcus, their lawyers had advised them that proceeding would be costly and ultimately unsuccessful. The battle was over, and I had won, but the victory felt hollow. What I had truly lost wasn't measured in acres or dollars, but in the family connections that had been irreparably severed. Yet as painful as it was, I couldn't deny the strange sense of freedom that came with it. For the first time in my life, I was completely unburdened by the weight of their expectations and judgment. That night, I visited Grandma's property, my property, and sat on the porch swing where we had spent so many hours in conversation. You were right, I said aloud to the evening air. About everything. The gentle breeze that rustled through the pines felt, just for a moment, like her hand on my shoulder. With the legal battle behind me, I entered a period of unexpected personal transformation. The property was securely mine, but I carried emotional wounds that needed healing. At Jason's gentle urging, I began seeing a therapist who specialized in family trauma. What your family did to you has a name, Dr. Winters told me during our third session. It's called scapegoating, making one family member bear the blame for everyone's problems or discomfort. It had nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with their need for someone to project onto. Those words struck me like lightning. All those years of feeling fundamentally flawed, of believing I wasn't trying hard enough or achieving enough, it had never been about me at all. The hardest part of healing, Dr. Winters continued, will be accepting that they may never acknowledge what they did. Your recovery can't depend on their recognition or apology. Over the following months, therapy helped me recognize patterns I'd never noticed before. How I apologized constantly for things that weren't my fault, how I downplayed my achievements, how I expected criticism even from people who had never criticized me. Jason stood by me through every difficult session, every tearful realization. I'm so proud of you, he would say. This is the hardest kind of work there is. As my perspective shifted, so did my vision for the property. What had started as a vague idea about preserving the land evolved into something more purposeful. I began researching sustainable building practices and consulting with experts in environmental design. 6 months after the legal challenge was withdrawn, Jason and I met with Hank Simmons, a local builder who specialized in eco-friendly construction. To my surprise, he remembered Grandma Eleanor. She was a remarkable woman, Hank said as we walked the property together. Did you know she fought the county back in the 80s when they wanted to run a road through this land? Said they'd have to carry her off in handcuffs first. I hadn't known, but it sounded exactly like her. She'd be proud of what you're planning here, Hank continued, examining my preliminary sketches for a modest, energy-efficient home on the least environmentally sensitive portion of the property, building with the land instead of against it. We decided to restore Grandma's house as well, updating it with modern efficiency standards while preserving its character. The project would take time and most of my savings, but it felt right honoring the past while building for the future. During the initial clearing for the new construction, I made a discovery that changed everything. In Grandma's old garden shed, tucked inside a weathered trunk, I found a collection of journals dating back to her 20s. Reading them was like having conversations with her across time. The journals revealed a woman I'd only glimpsed fiercely independent, occasionally doubtful, deeply thoughtful about her place in the world. She wrote about her decision to marry Grandpa despite her parents' disapproval, about raising my father and hoping he would inherit her love of the land, about her disappointment when he chose a different path. And she wrote about me. Le 12 juin 2005, Mackenzie visited again today. That child has such clarity of vision she sees beyond the surface of things to their true nature. Robert and Diana don't understand her at all. They measure worth in dollars and status, but Mackenzie measures it in integrity and impact. I see so much of myself in her. The parts I'm most proud of. I worry about what will happen to this land when I'm gone. Robert would develop it in a heartbeat, divide it into lots for overpriced homes. Rachel has no connection to it at all. But Mackenzie, she understands what makes this place special. She's the only one I trust to be its guardian after I'm gone. Reading those words, I felt Grandma's presence so strongly it took my breath away. She had seen me, truly seen me, and valued precisely the qualities my parents had dismissed. The validation I'd sought from them my entire life had been given freely by her all along. Energized by this connection across time, I threw myself into the building project with renewed purpose. Jason and I spent every weekend at the property, working alongside Hank and his crew. I learned to lay tile, install insulation, and select sustainable materials. One evening, as Jason and I stood on the partially completed deck of our new home, watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks, he knelt down and took my hand. "Mackenzie Anderson," he said, his voice slightly shaky. "I've fallen in love with you more every day for the past 3 years. I've watched you stand up for yourself, fight for what matters, and become even more the extraordinary person you've always been. Will you marry me?" The ring he offered was simple and perfect. A small emerald set in recycled gold. No diamond, nothing flashy or conventional, just like us. "Yes," I said, tears streaming down my face. 1,000 times yes. We celebrated with a bottle of wine on our unfinished deck, making plans under the stars. Neither of us wanted a big wedding, just something intimate on the property once the house was complete. "Should we invite your family?" Jason asked cautiously. I considered the question seriously. No, I decided. This day should be about joy and love, not tension and old wounds. The following month, I received an unexpected email from the editor of the local newspaper. They were doing a feature on sustainable building projects in the region and wanted to include our home. "Your grandmother was something of a local legend for her environmental advocacy," the email explained. "There's a nice full-circle story here about you continuing her legacy." I agreed to the interview, sharing our vision for harmonizing modern sustainable technology with the natural beauty of the land. The article, when it appeared, was thoughtful and detailed, featuring photographs of the property and quotes from local environmental experts praising the approach. What I hadn't anticipated was how widely the article would be shared. It was picked up by regional publications and several sustainability blogs. Suddenly, my inbox was filling with messages from people interested in similar projects, asking for advice or sharing their own experiences. 2 weeks after the article appeared, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. Saw the article about your project. Impressive work. Would like to reconnect. Dad, asterisk. My heart raced as I stared at the message. After nearly a year of silence, now that I was receiving positive public attention, my father wanted to reconnect. The timing was so transparent, it would have been funny if it weren't so painful. I showed the message to Jason. "What do you want to do?" he asked, careful not to influence my decision. I thought about it for several days, discussing it in therapy, journaling about my feelings. Finally, I replied, asterisk, thank you. I'm open to meeting for coffee if you'd like to talk. Asterisk. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, the same coffee shop where Rachel had begun her campaign of manipulation. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. This time, however, I arrived feeling centered and prepared, not desperate for approval or reconciliation. My father looked older than I remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper, his posture less commanding. He stood awkwardly when I approached, as if unsure whether to offer a handshake or a hug. We settled for a nod. "You look well," he said after we'd ordered our drinks. "I am well," I replied simply. "Your mother and I saw the article about your project. It's quite innovative." "Thank you." The conversation stalled. My father, usually so confident and verbose, seemed at a loss. I waited, refusing to fill the uncomfortable silence. "Mackenzie," he finally said, "I think perhaps there have been some misunderstandings in our family." "I don't think there were any misunderstandings," I replied calmly. "I understood perfectly when you said you invest in success, not failure. I understood when you and Mom supported Rachel both emotionally and financially while dismissing my achievements. And I certainly understood when you tried to legally steal the land Grandma Eleanor explicitly left to me." He flinched. "That's a harsh characterization. It's an accurate one." Another uncomfortable silence stretched between us. "We miss you," he said finally, his voice uncharacteristically small. "Do you?" I asked. "Or do you miss the idea of having a complete family now that I'm doing something you consider successful?" He didn't answer directly, which was answer enough. "I'm willing to have a relationship with you and Mom," I said, "but it will be on very different terms than before. I won't tolerate being dismissed or compared to Rachel. I won't pretend the past didn't happen, and I won't give up 1 inch of Grandma's land." My father nodded slowly. "I understand." "And Rachel?" "Rachel deliberately betrayed my trust in the cruelest way possible. I'm not ready to have any contact with her, and I don't know if I ever will be." "She's your sister," he protested. "Biology doesn't entitle her to a relationship with me," I countered. "Trust and respect do, and she's destroyed both." We parted with a tentative plan to have dinner in a few weeks, a dinner that would include my mother but not Rachel. As I watched my father walk away, I felt neither triumph nor bitterness, just a quiet certainty that I was finally standing firmly in my truth. Over the next 6 months, Jason and I completed our home, a beautiful, efficient structure that seemed to grow naturally from the landscape. We restored Grandma's house too, maintaining its character while updating its systems. The 5 acres flourished under our care, with native plantings replacing the invasive species that had begun to take over. My relationship with my parents developed slowly, cautiously. There were difficult conversations and occasional setbacks, but also moments of genuine connection that would have been impossible before. They never fully acknowledged the harm they'd done, but they did begin to see me as an individual separate from their expectations. Rachel remained conspicuously absent from family gatherings. According to my mother, she and Timothy had purchased an expensive home in Portland's West Hills, not the one my parents had intended to help fund, but a similar property. She had been promoted again and was expecting their first child. I wished her well in my heart, but maintained my boundaries. Some bridges, once burned, cannot and should not be rebuilt. In late spring, Jason and I were married on the property, surrounded by wildflowers Grandma Eleanor had planted decades earlier. Our ceremony was small but meaningful, attended by close friends, a few of my colleagues from Green Oregon Initiative, Jason's family, and, somewhat awkwardly, my parents. As we exchanged vows under the ancient oak tree that had witnessed generations of family history, I felt Grandma's presence as strongly as if she were standing beside me. In honoring her legacy, I had found my own path forward, one built on authentic values, healthy boundaries, and genuine love. 1 year after our wedding, Jason and I had settled into a rhythm that felt both grounded and expansive. Our home, now complete, had been featured in several sustainability publications. The solar panels generated more electricity than we used, feeding the excess back into the grid. Our rainwater collection system supplied all our needs except during the driest weeks of summer. The garden produced abundant organic vegetables, which we shared with neighbors and local food banks. Grandma's house had become a guest cottage for friends and family, but I'd also begun using it for something she would have loved: educational workshops on environmental stewardship. Several times a month, I hosted small groups of students or community members for sessions on native plantings, water conservation, or sustainable building techniques. My work at Green Oregon Initiative had evolved as well. Inspired by our success with the property, I'd proposed an education outreach program, which the board enthusiastically approved. We secured funding to develop curriculum materials and field trip opportunities for local schools. Jason's construction business had shifted to focus almost exclusively on sustainable building projects, with a growing reputation for innovative solutions that balanced environmental responsibility with practical needs. He often collaborated with my educational programs, demonstrating techniques and explaining the science behind our choices. My relationship with my parents continued to improve, though slowly, and with occasional difficult moments. They'd visited the completed property several times, and I'd seen genuine admiration in my father's eyes as he toured the homes and gardens. "Your grandmother would be proud," he'd said during their last visit, a concession that meant more to me than he probably realized. My mother, more practical, had added, "Though I still think you could have done something more with all this land." I'd simply smiled. Her inability to fully understand my choices no longer wounded me. Rachel and I remained estranged. She'd sent a card after the birth of her son, with a photo and a brief note that read, "Family is forever. When you're ready to move past our differences, your nephew would like to meet his aunt." I'd kept the photo but hadn't responded. Some wounds need more than time to heal. They need acknowledgement and genuine remorse, neither of which Rachel had offered. On the anniversary of Grandma Eleanor's passing, I sat on my front porch, reading through her journals again. The entry that caught my attention that day was from decades earlier. The 3rd of April 1978 The developer called again with another offer for the south parcel. The figure he quoted made Robert's eyes light up, but money isn't everything. Some things, once lost, can never be recovered at any price. The ancient oak that stood for 300 years. The family of foxes that returns each spring. The quiet that settles over the meadow at dusk. These are the true inheritances worth preserving. I told Robert that wealth isn't measured only in bank accounts. He says I'm being impractical, that land is just land. But it's not. Land is memory. Land is legacy. Land is trust. Perhaps one day someone in this family will understand what I mean. I closed the journal, tears blurring my vision. She had been writing to me across time, trusting that someday I would be the one to read these words and recognize their truth. That evening, as Jason and I walked the property at sunset, I shared my evolving vision for its future. "I've been thinking about establishing a formal land trust," I explained. "Something that would ensure this property remains undeveloped and accessible for environmental education even after we're gone." Jason squeezed my hand. "I think that's perfect. And I want to set up a scholarship fund in Grandma Eleanor's name," I continued, "for students pursuing degrees in environmental science or sustainable development. Not a huge amount, but enough to help someone who might not otherwise have the opportunity." "Your grandmother would love that," Jason said, using her legacy to create opportunities for others. As we watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The painful labeling as the family failure had ultimately freed me to define success on my own terms. The rejection by my parents had pushed me to find validation within myself rather than from external sources. Even Rachel's betrayal had taught me the value of boundaries and the importance of surrounding myself with people whose love was authentic and unconditional. You know, I said to Jason, for most of my life, I thought success meant achieving things that impressed other people, prestigious degrees, high-paying jobs, status symbols. And now? He prompted. Now I think success is about alignment, having your outer life reflect your inner values. It's about creating something meaningful rather than just accumulating things. It's about being a person you're proud to be, regardless of anyone else's opinion. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders. By that definition, you're the most successful person I know. The land stretched before us, bathed in moonlight, 5 acres that had become not just a home but a purpose. What my family had seen as worthless, I had recognized as invaluable. What they had wanted to divide and sell, I had chosen to preserve and share. In the end, being labeled the family failure had been my unexpected gift. It had forced me to question conventional definitions of success and failure. It had pushed me to find my own path rather than following the one laid out by others. It had taught me that sometimes the greatest achievements are the ones that can't be quantified or displayed. As we turned to walk back to our home, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had honored Grandma Eleanor's trust in me, and in doing so, had found my own strength, my own voice, my own version of success. Before we go, I'd love to know, have you ever been labeled as the failure or disappointment in your family? How did that shape who you became? Drop a comment below to share your experience. Your story might help someone else who's struggling with similar family dynamics. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories like this one, and share with someone who might need to hear that being underestimated can be their secret advantage too. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, true success isn't measured by others' expectations, but by living authentically according to your own values.